Listen close, it's the occult folk. It's the occult folks. It's the occult folks.
Welcome to the show. Today we have Fritz Zimmerman. He is the author of a ton of different books on giants, which happens to be a huge interest of mine. And with that, welcome, Fritz. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Alex. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so would you like to just kind of get into your recent release?
Well, the latest book is Ancient America, The Dark Side. And where I go into paranormal experiences that I experienced in 30 years of research, 12 years, 13 years of that being field work. I personally investigated 700 burial mound and earthwork sites in Indiana, Ohio, West Virginia, Kentucky, and Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
I've been to more burial mounds than anyone's ever been in history of history. And in those journeys and investigations, I came across different paranormal experiences, UFOs. Um, and for this book, I sought out people that had also experienced paranormal experiences at burial mound and earthwork sites. And I kind of searched them out. But over the last 10, 12 years, people have given me their experiences of, what they've seen of shadow people and UFOs and disembodied voices and just the whole gambit of the paranormal world. So that opens up, this new venue of these ancient sites. Of course, we have the giants and, it was buried in the mounds, and the geometrics and advanced mathematics of pi and square roots and Pythagorean triangles, the use of trigonometry in their layout design of an advanced people of Nephilim architecture. And now we have paranormal.
Yeah, so when did you start experiencing that kind of paranormal activity when you started visiting these sites?
Yeah, right away. Right away. Within like the first two or three burial mound sites that I had gone to. Well, let me tell you, it took probably 20 mounds before we found one because we were going to all of them. Like in one county north here, there was 35 burial mounds. Well, every one of those 35 sites were visited. And so when we got, I don't know, 15, 20, we finally found one. And then, subsequently we start finding more and more. But immediately it was just a feeling in the air, kind of an electricity that me and uh, a friend of mine were, she was feeling it and, asking me, and I was feeling it. I was asking her, I said, there's something off at these sites. It's almost like an energy is being given off. And so we noticed it right away.
Yeah. So do you feel like that could be something like biblical or tied to something biblical?
Well, I mean, it is. It is in the fact that these were the Nephilim, these were the giants,
Mm-hmm.
these were the spawn of angels. And, if you want, you can scratch angels, sons of God, UFOs, Anunnaki, whatever you want to put in there. But they were given secrets. And one of the secrets was mathematics. And, that's what I was alluding to earlier, that we find in the Ohio geometric earthworks that they had knowledge of square roots of numbers. They knew how to get the circumference of a circle. They were squaring circles. which takes us into geomancy that we're going to find within the placement of earthworks in England and so real big tie with England, what you're going to find in England and the Ohio Valley. But yeah, they were using advanced mathematics, trigonometry, laying earthworks out to form Pythagorean triangles, 3, 4, 5 in lengths. And so the argument is that while some of the earthworks, the Dakota Sioux were the Hopewell mound builders, who they were known as that, there were also the Adena. The Adena were these, well, we can best point to Amorites, a known tribe in the Bible that controlled Babylon from 2000 BC to about 1600 BC. But we know they possess all of these mathematical skills, which is found within their tablets, that they were doing an advanced trigonometry that some researchers have said that their advanced trigonometry was more advanced than we're practicing today. And then we're seeing that trigonometry playing out within these earthworks. And so that's the question of, the woke thing to say is that they're all Native American, and science just doesn't say that Native Americans were not practicing advanced trigonometry.
Yeah.
And that these people, these Amorites, did come over here, and they were the builders of these geometric earthworks. So that would be your biblical tie right there.
It's kind of curious, like like the paranormal stuff that you're like encountering. You write a lot about Nephilim. I've kind of like heard theorized when they die, technically, I guess since they're not like created by God, like their spirits just linger or could possibly linger here on Earth.
Well, it's everything you do with it. In the book of Enoch, it says that the spirits of the Nephilim will be earthbound.
Mm-hmm.
So earthbound means that, they're not going to another place. They're here. So they're here. They're still around the burial mounds. They're still around the earthworks, except we have started doing paranormal investigations. We're going to get cut off here by spring, but we'll start those up maybe in a couple of spots in a couple of months. But in the paranormal investigations we've done, we found that they're not inside the earthworks. They dwell outside of the earthworks, and they're not necessarily at mounds. We've investigated 3 burial mounds, and we thought that was be where you really get a lot of spirit activity. So far, that's not been the case. We're finding outside of earthworks of hilltop enclosures, things that we've investigated so far. It is going to be a new venue for paranormal investigations, which, if any of you are, into that subject, it's getting old. Some of this are kind of running out of places to go. And, but this is a whole different ball game, opposed to somebody that was dead 100 years ago. We're talking somebody dead 2,000 years ago.
So, can you run us down like what one of those type of encounters would be? Like you guys going out and kind of looking for the activity?
Well, we've, basically did some tests and just to see if we had enough, to present a series. And there was a medium that went with me, and she's also a Reiki master. And she was kind of like my bait.
Mm-hmm.
And so we went to 4 different sites and, did some filming, collecting, information, or, I bought, I have every paranormal piece of equipment that's imaginable. So yeah, we were getting good results, disembodied voices. We were getting EVPs. Of course, you can't understand the language because they're not speaking English, nor should they. That's why I didn't buy an Ovilus. And an Ovilus is, the machine where you see words come through. Well, one, it's kind of bogus that they can manipulate it, bring the words out. So it's kind of bogus. But if they were going to manipulate it, it's not going to be English.
Yeah.
and that machine doesn't have a database, it would be Semitic. It would be Hebrew, is
Hmm.
what we would be hearing. So you're not going to understand it anyway. Could be Hebrew, could be a form of Aramaic. We don't really know, but probably Hebrew. But the one we did get, I mean, it was a definite voice. It's definitely saying something, but you can't understand it. You can't
Yeah.
understand exactly what it's saying.
Interesting. So did you choose any of these sites based off of like any specific research that you did?
Yes, one that we were at was Geller Hill, and that's at Newark.
Hmm.
The Newark Earthworks. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you have to look it up. It is a circle attached to an octagon, and then there's a hinge. And I don't know, to give you an idea, the circle and the octagon, the size of those, there is a full size golf course inside of it. All
Mm.
18 holes are within the circle and octagon.
Wow.
So we're talking about something small. Each gateway to the octagon is aligned to a lunar standstill of northern or maximum northern moonrise, minimum northern moonrise, maximum south, ding, 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 back and forth. It takes 18.6 years for this to happen. And I believe the right down the middle of this is going to be in May of
Huh.
this year. So it'll line up. There's a two parallels that Earthworks that connect the octagon and the circle, and it'll be right through that parallel. Is that be the moonrise in May? So
Holy
that
cow.
only happens every 18.6 years. And then I don't know, 4,000 feet, 3,000 feet to the west of there is the hinge. The hinge is 3,600 feet in circumference. So, it's three-quarters of a mile just to walk around it. But the gateway is aligned to May 1, Beltane. And then you can stand in the gateway and look out, and then the gateway on October 31st will again line up for Samhain. So both of these are Celtic holidays that actually have their roots in the Levant with the giants. And Native
Wow.
Americans, South American natives, did not practice May 1, October 31. This is pretty isolated to the Celts, and their origin is in the ancient Levant with the giants. Like I mentioned earlier, we do have a lot of evidence that the giants were in England as well, building hinges like just the same. The hinges in England and the hinges in Ohio, you can't tell them apart. So circular earthwork, interior ditch, and a gateway generally aligned to a solar event. In this case, to May 1, and they're very unique and they're associated with the same skeletal types of being very tall, brutish, or more of an archaic type skull. Nothing that would be resemble that of a modern man, because what we're talking about is not, we're not talking a race, we're talking a species of man. So we're not going to get, mired in white, Caucasian, Native American. It doesn't matter because we're talking about a different species. We are talking, which lends itself to the Bible when it says, when the sons of God saw daughters of men, giants were. So this commingling. So, and if you don't believe that, where you believe that there was UFOs that genetically manipulated men's DNA, then either one of those is going to fit because these skulls look so different than that of a modern man. They are more Neanderthalish, very brutish, sloping foreheads, um, beetle brows, very prominent brow ridges, more like a Neanderthal. They had occipital buns. That's a kind of a crown in the back of your head that modern men don't have.
Mhm.
Neanderthals have it, and then these mound builders have it. And double rows of teeth, sometimes bony protrusions or horns coming out of the forehead. So yeah, we're talking about a
Wow.
completely different type of skull
Yeah.
and humanoid.
Yeah. Along with that, did they find examples of maybe like six fingers on each hand?
Yes,
stuff like that.
yes.
That's extremely, extremely interesting. I found
Which
off,
does happen. It happens in modern times,
yeah,
but it's not prevalent. And
yeah,
with them, it's prevalent. So there's just one more genetic anomaly that they had.
yeah.
So yes.
Um, I've kind of noticed, I'm not sure if you have, kind of like them using golf courses to kind of cover up some of these type of works. Is that something that you've kind of picked up on?
No. The golf course is what kept it Newark intact.
Really?
They kept it mowed. They kept the outer banks that mowed, and now it's been given to some global um, people. And I guarantee that the center of it will have tall grass. And when you go, probably this year, because they throw the golf course out, they kept it beautifully manicured
Hmm.
because some Native American wandered out there and thought they had every right to have a powwow and pray in the middle of this golf course, and there were people golfing at the time, and that started this big ado. Well, they have a right to go on it, and it's like, well, yeah, just go early in the morning. You have all winter when they don't play golf to go, and the golf course isn't going to do anything about you walking out there. But there has to be some sort of give and take for them to perfectly preserve this earthwork. That yeah, you can go in the evening when the golfing's done. You could go really early in the morning. But during the golf season, they're going to be limited somewhat. But you have all the winter months to go out there and do it. But that wasn't good enough. So um, now it's with I don't know, the name of it escapes me right now, but it's some global trust. It's all going to be run by foreigners, and it's going to be left overgrown. They're not going to have the budget to mow this whole thing,
Yeah.
and it's basically going to go into decay. So the circle and the octagon are going to go into decay. The hinge is going to go into decay, and everything is going to be unlike it's been for the last 100 years that the golf course has been there, because it became a woke idea that Native Americans should be able to walk out there and do their thing anytime they want, even though it wasn't a big deal where there was just hundreds that wanted to access this.
Yeah.
It was one person. One person decided to do this, and the Native Americans, except for the Dakota Sioux, who were with the Hopewell, we have in Ohio that Algonquin tribes, the Shawnee, they want to take credit for like the serpent. Well, no, they weren't even in Ohio when that was built. Nor is the serpent really part of their religious canon to the point where they would have built a serpent mound. It's aligned to the summer solstice sunset. That's not part of their religious canon. There is nothing about that. There's burial mounds around the serpent mound with these different types of skulls that are not the same type of skulls as the Shawnee,
Hmm.
nor does the Shawnee have any history of ever being mound builders. So the only thing is that in the 16th, 17th century, there were Shawnee in that region of Ohio. And so now, it's the woke thing to do to say, well, anything there is Shawnee,
Yeah.
all Shawnee. Nothing to prove it's Shawnee, but because the woke thing to do, and woke isn't based on facts, it's based on emotions. The
Yeah.
emotional thing to do is to give it to the Shawnee. It's not the factual thing to do because they never built it and they never buried their dead in it. But, that's another where, um, they used to at Christmas time, they would take bags of, with a candle in it and they would light up the serpent. Oh, something beautiful. Well, they said that was being disrespectful. So they had to stop doing it. And like, well, why?
Yeah.
It's not yours. I mean, it wasn't hurt anything. It was kind of cool. Um, and, just stupid things like that, is what we deal with. Like
Yeah.
I said, it's not anything, nothing in Ohio is based on facts. It's all based on emotion. Whatever the emotion is what rules today. And when fortunately now,
Yeah.
for, one of the greatest earthworks in the world, one of the largest earthworks in the world, is now being handed over to a group, and it's just going to be left overgrown, and it's not going to be near what it is going into this season, because up till last year the golf course had it. So now we have the winter, the grass isn't growing.
Yeah.
So here we go. We're really going to tell in about a month. Well, start overgrowing, and it'll just be ruins. You won't be able to tell anything. The embankments probably won't be mowed. If you go to Mound City in Chillicothe, Ohio, you go there in the summer, the whole interior is left with grass that grows about 6 feet in the interior of this earthwork.
Yeah.
And I ask the DNR. Usually you have the DNR, there. You have cops. You have people with guns that run these prehistoric sites. I
Hmm.
ask, why are you letting this overgrow like that? She said, well, that would have been a natural way it was. And I said, no, 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 no. Why would they go to the trouble of building this geometric earthwork with, I don't know, 36 mounds, 38 mounds, something, in this interior, and then let it all overgrow?
Yeah.
No, they would have planted something like wild strawberries. That's an invasive species. It'll take over, but it'll never grow more than, seen a wild strawberry. It's like an inch off the ground.
Mhm. Yeah,
No,
exactly.
idiots. You're the idiot. Idiots are running it now, but idiots aren't the people that build it. And that's the
So,
way the octagon is going to be.
yeah,
Now we're handing it over to the idiots. We're going to see
yeah.
how the idiots are going to maintain it. And they're not going to maintain it the same way that these people that went to all of this effort to build these earthworks and then just to let it overgrow. No, that would have never happened. It's going to happen now, but we're not going to look at it. Um, it would be like buying an old historic building and then not ever doing anything to it. Buying it and not ever mowing the lawn,
Kind of what the
never
government's
painting
done
it
with
in.
a lot of their like architecture, really. A lot of the old architecture around cities go unused. I mean, I've kind of noticed it in Dallas, like one of the oldest castles. Like it's a this huge red brick castle in the middle of Dallas. Used to serve as like a courthouse, just completely unused now. Nobody, it's abandoned. I'm afraid that they're gonna either, I don't know, catch on fire or demolish it or something. But
They
so what?
will,
So
because the more they let it go into neglect, the more money it will take to renovate it. And then generally those places fall into, they end up in kind of crime-ridden areas
yeah,
where actually, your property is not appreciating; it starts depreciating. The value starts going down,
yeah.
and then it's houses like that. It's happened, in every city
So why do
like
you
that.
think? Yeah, why do you think the such a closed mind? Historically speaking, when it comes to some of these sites where obviously it came before the Native Americans, and anybody with an open mind and like, a brain knows that. People in loincloths probably didn't build, some of these amazing earthworks. So do you think that there's like anything behind that or like a specific reason of why it just like natives were the only people here before?
Yes, that is the academic rule to go against that Native Americans were the only people that ever were in North America. You would be censored in a uh, vocation where it's, publish or perish. You'll never be published if you go against the line, and the line is it was only Native Americans, even though it's obvious that they didn't know pi, they didn't know square root, they didn't know Pythagorean triangles. Why would they? They
Yeah.
were a Stone Age people, so why
Mhm.
would they? Why would they have that? Now the head of the Ohio Historical Connection is now saying that there was one Native American that had figured out all of this advanced mathematics, who they say is Michelangelo. They said was the Michelangelo of Native Americans. And he alone built all these geometric earthworks in Ohio that span about 500 years. So not only did one person do it, but he lived to be 500 years old.
Wow.
And he's the one. And I call him
Crazy.
Squanto Angelo. So Squanto Angelo is one Native American that built all of these. And because, see, they know you can't argue math. Math either is or it isn't. Either you have a Pythagorean triangle or you don't. Either, well, here's a for instance. In Newark, there's the hinge. It is 3,700 feet in circumference.
Hmm.
And then adjacent to that, and that's the one that's aligned to May 1, Beltane, and October 31st. Adjacent to that is a square earthwork where each of the sides of the square is 925 feet. So the sum total of the square is equal to the circumference of the circle. And the octagon with the square placed in it in area is equal to the area of the hinge that's aligned to May 1. And the circle attached to the octagon is equal in area to the square earthwork that's 925 feet. That is called circling the square. Now, what does that mean? That was the sacred marriage of the opposites. That was the marriage of the sun and the lunar or the earth deity, sometimes called the yin yang also. So it's a very similar symbol that represents the same thing. The circle represents the sun, the square represents the earth mother or a lunar deity. So you don't want too much sun and you don't want too much of the lunar or the earth. So one represents sun, one represents rain and the earth. So you have to have that balance of rain and sun. And, that's what they're trying to achieve. And they're doing this, through sacred geometry. They're doing it through mathematics. So that's what we're looking at. When we're looking at that, the mathematics of these earthworks, and we're looking at the sacred geometry within the earthworks too. So that lends that this is not a Native American work. And so when I say Nephilim architecture, I'm saying Nephilim and just exchange that with giant. So this is giants architecture.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And we find these same things happen in England with Stonehenge and, where they're tracking the 18-year cycle of the moon. They're also tracking, the solar events. There is mathematics involved with Stonehenge as well. And so here it shows up here. And so it's not disparaging Native Americans because we know the Hopewell were the Dakota Sioux. And so the Dakota Sioux were there. But they were, getting that with these Amorites being there. So I'm going to say that it was, white people came over because I already said it was a different species of man.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a definite Native American presence there. So, don't want to dismiss that. I'm saying the Algonquins were never there. The Dakota Sioux, they were, but the Algonquins, who were the tribes historically that were in the Ohio Valley of Shawnee and Miami and Delaware, those tribes. So, they never had a historic past in the Ohio Valley. They were probably in prehistoric times up in Canada.
Yeah. I've come across certain tribes maybe mentioning or even attributing like giants to building some of the earthworks or the mounds. Have you found that at all?
Oh yeah, they all say, oh, Native Americans. For instance, I was talking about the Shawnee cornstalk.
Hmm.
Cornstalk, maybe from Point Pleasant, you put the curse and that on there. Um, he said that the earthworks were already there when they arrived, and that the legend was that there was a white-skinned people
Yeah.
that had come many, moons ago, and they were the builders of those. Uh, Chief Joseph of the Iroquois, I think I'm talking about the right one. He said that there was a persistent legend of all the tribes east of the Mississippi that one time there was a people that had come from the east, were white skinned, and they were the builders of the earthworks. So other Native Americans said that these people had a book of knowledge that had things in it and things that the native didn't know anything about.
Wow.
So this knowledge we're probably referring to the math and geometrics and surveying skills, which they would have had to have. They would have had to been able to survey, which we knew that the Amorites in Babylon were doing because they were surveying because they were cutting up the land.
Hmm.
They were selling land, and to sell land, you have to have surveys done. So you own from this to this, and it's all legit. So they had to have surveying skills to lay these out. We know that they had that. And again, why would Native Americans be doing surveys on land that nobody owned?
Yeah.
That's their shtick. You can't own the land.
Yeah. I mean, they're
We
protecting
own
it
the
from
land.
being surveyed right now, right?
Yeah,
Technically, yeah. That's funny. Yeah.
yeah. So, you had to have surveying skills to do what they did. So why
Yeah.
would they be surveying? For what possible reason? On land that you can't own. The only survey is to sell a parcel of land, or if you're building a geometric earthwork.
Yeah.
That is so large that there's no way to check your work. When you're looking at the octagon, you look, well, you're looking across a, a golf course. And yeah, you can see that embankment over, far away, but, you can't tell, really how it's, to make a perfect, this octagon. We're not just talking about random pieces of dirt. We're talking about geometric shapes.
Yeah. So,
And you can't check your work. You don't really know what you're looking at
yeah.
unless you look at it from above. All the earthworks, you don't know. Even the serpent. When you're walking just by the serpent, you're kind of looking over. Yeah, you can see it undulating, but you really only can tell what it is when you look at it from the tower up, that you climb. And so they were meant to be seen from the air. So was that for the fallen angels? Was it for UFOs? But it was made. They were all made, these geometric earthworks, to be seen from the air.
When do you think like this type of race of people or giants were wiped away?
They were
Is it
absorbed into the Sioux tribes.
okay?
Now, when George Catlin in I think the 1830s, 1820s, maybe,
Hmm.
he went out west to the Mandan Indians, and they were part of the Dakota. Um, they had red hair, blonde hair, green eyes, blue eyes, and Catlin. There's actually his drawings, or you can go and look at them online.
Hmm.
He said that they were European looking. Well, the only way that you can have blonde hair, red hair, green eyes, blue eyes is if both your mother and your father carried that gene. And it's not going to be buried too deep, for that to come up.
Yeah.
And that would go along with these people, that I don't know, we're not going to get too tied up in race, but they had those genetic qualities of blonde hair and red hair and green eyes, blue eyes, and then intermarried with Native Americans. And then that's how they had this gene. And some people might go to Maddox. No, no, no chance. Maddox may have come over here with what, 12 people? And he might have, he may not have. I don't know. I'm not going to argue with anybody about it.
Hmm.
But you're not going to change the genetic makeup of a whole tribe with 12 people.
Yeah.
You know,
Hmm.
12 people is not going to, 2,000 years later, and still have that. I mean, you have, and especially then, I mean, yeah, they're going to demand, but then those people will die. And then, there's other people
Yeah.
that didn't have those genes, and it would have just been overwhelmed until it just, was so small, and only some people even having that genetic makeup. So this was over, 1,000 years
Hmm.
where we had the giants here and we had the Dakota Sioux down there. So it was a long time
Yeah.
for people to pick up that DNA. And then it manifests, I mean, as late as the 1830s. And
Wow.
it's the only thing I can think of how or why they would have had that genetic makeup if we're dealing with what the archaeologists say that everyone came from Asia over and down through here. Well, where did they pick up European DNA and in Asia? Well, they didn't. They would have had to pick it up here.
Were there accounts during colonial times of them experiencing giants along with Native Americans, like
Yeah,
alongside?
yeah, they were tall.
Yeah.
They were really tall. Some of them were, not all, but
Because I've
yeah,
seen.
they would run across in historic times. Large Iroquois, large Cherokee, large Algonquin. So yeah, that gene may have pervaded different peoples over. They were here so long that
Hmm.
maybe that gene, that being tall, was passed to different tribes. That doesn't mean those tribes, because they had a few people that were tall, were part of the mound builders in
Yeah.
Ohio. But I mean, it was very possible that there could have been, genetic exchange through trade or, through other different means than, them actually being the builders of or living with.
Yeah. I find it fascinating that they will attribute, Native Americans for the sites, but the own native accounts, they attribute somebody else completely different before them.
Well, that's just the thing, is that they attribute Native Americans generally.
Hmm.
It's a general attribution to the Mounds and Earthworks in Ohio. Well, what they won't do is make a specific of the Dakota Sioux, because if they do make a specific Dakota Sioux, then NAGPRA um, is invoked, and NAGPRA is a Native American Graves Protection Act, which you cannot possess known relics, skeletal remains of a known tribe. So see, as long as they call them Hopewell,
Yeah.
then that's not a known tribe. As soon as they say Dakota Sioux, the thousands and thousands of skeletal remains that are in universities have to be given back to the Dakota Sioux for them to rebury or bury in Ohio. So see, they won't do that either. So they're screwing the Native Americans. I mean, sure, they come across as being woke, and anything that says not Native American is being racist.
Yeah.
But the real crime is what they're doing in not naming that the Dakota Sioux were the Hopewell. And by doing so, they can hoard all the relics that were looted from burial mounds over the last 100 years, the skeletal remains looted from the burial mounds. And we also have, Iroquois influence through Northeast Indiana, through Northern Ohio, into Pennsylvania, New York. Some of their remains also go under the guise of Hopewell, Point Peninsula, Meadowood. See, everything, they're calling them everything but what they are. Those are all archaeological terms to hide the real um, attribution of what tribe those things came to. And we know that that Point Peninsula, which is directly related to Iroquois, that through that northern tier around the Great Lakes, those prehistoric remains would belong to them. But see, they'll come up with glacial cane and all the other, like I said, Meadowood and Point Peninsula and all these other names are what they'll attribute those earthworks, those are archaeological terms, to hide the fact that if they say Iroquois, they have to give back all the skeletons, all the artifacts that were looted in their burials. And so don't confuse woke with being anything nice or anything that is a benefactor to Native Americans. It's just the opposite.
Yeah.
It's all meant to hide their history so
Honestly,
that
yeah,
they
I
can
completely agree.
continue to dig and destroy their burial sites.
Is there like a entity or company or anything like that kind of behind um, most of this destruction, or do you think it's kind of
Uh,
just a lack of
Awareness.
yeah, I gotcha.
Oh, what are we doing? Oh, hey, you find an artifact? You should go to the local university and they'll tell you what it is. They're the experts.
Yeah.
Well, are they? I mean, some guy, he read a couple books. I mean, what is college? You read what, 15 books and you're an expert and you'll
Yeah.
get your degree, whether that be in finance, archaeology, communication, whatever it is. I mean, it didn't come down to a whole lot.
Yeah.
Oh, go to the university. They're the experts. They know. No, they don't know a lot of times, I mean, some of the biggest dumbasses you'll ever meet in your life will have a college degree.
Well,
Yeah,
yeah, because a lot of them become closed-minded like immediately after they graduate, and then like honestly, like their learning stops there, and they kind of
absolutely
close
suffering because
and they
now they're
close
part
off.
of the cult.
Yeah,
Now they're part of the cult.
that's what's
And the
very
cult
odd to
says,
me.
this is what you say, this is what the facts are. Yeah, learning stops.
Kind of teach you what to think, like kind of what to think, not how
Not
to.
how to think, what to think.
Yeah,
Right.
it's
They'll all say the same thing. Um,
Are there any
uh,
like specific sites that you've noticed that have been destroyed over like your time of research?
oh, yeah, different mounds here in Indiana. I'll go, for some reason or another, I'd go back and there'd be a hole in the top, and I can always tell an archaeological hole. I
Yeah.
mean, they are methodical on how they dig. Opposed to somebody just taking a shovel, you'll see a nice clean square. If you see like a rough hole, it was done probably 100 years, 200 years ago, 150 years ago. If you see something real methodical, that's an archaeologist digging.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, they continue to destroy. They had archaeological week here in Indiana. There is a small henge in Newcastle, Indiana, that's aligned to the what is that? That is the winter solstice sunrise. And there was a burial mound in the middle of it, which we also find in the hinges in England. There would be a hinge lined with solar, and right in the middle of it, aligned with the gateway, will be a burial mound. And for Archaeological Week, they dug into the burial mound and destroyed it.
Wow.
And university archaeologists at the hinge at Anderson, Indiana, that is no longer there. That's gone for universities. Here in Newcastle, Indiana, also, there was a beautiful, it was like, I don't know, 90-foot long mound with an earthwork that went around it and a ditch
Mhm.
that lined to the equinox with another mound to the west for a equinox sunset alignment. Uh, and now it's all but gone.
Yeah.
Archaeologists destroyed it. So yeah, they're responsible for a lot of the destruction of burial mounds. And in Ohio, my travel guide, the Nephilim Chronicles, a travel guide to the ancient ruins, where I had 12 years of research. all of the mounds, which, like, if you go to Ohio to see the mounds, they're going to give you about 30, when in reality, there's about 90. So those 60 are address restricted by university, by the Ohio Historical Connection, not Society, Connection.
Yeah.
So they're being hidden from you with the belief that if you know where these burial mounds and you'll dig into them. Well, news to them, this is your history. It didn't belong to some, idiot at the university or some idiot at the Ohio Historical Connection. This is your history. You have every right to go. You don't have a right to dig. You don't have a right to go on someone's property. But these things are the size of a two-story building. You can easily see it from the road.
Yeah.
So I give you directions to all those. I give you directions to earthworks that they don't know about that are in public places where you can go and walk and see them. Don't have to worry about getting a trespass fine or anything like that. There's things I had to leave out because it was on private property and I didn't want people, walking on the land. I got pictures of them, but you can't go on land. But the book is things, all the things you can go. There's 222 sites, and in the book,
Wow.
and every one of them, except for a couple that were really big, and you really need to see a picture just to know that it's there. And I really don't give you directions on how to see it. I'll tell you what county it is and what part of the county it is. But there's so many you can see that, there was a couple that I need to put in there. But if you go to Ohio in that area, into West Virginia, Indiana, I say for every earthwork you would have seen, you'll pass by two. So pass by two, see one. So you can either see all three, or after seeing three earthworks in Ohio, you get to see 9. And some of them, the second largest burial mound in Ohio is not the Enon Mound, which is in a subdivision, but it's, easy to see. The road goes right by it. It's not there. There are 2 or 3 other mounds that would be second, third, fourth. Enon's going to come in number 5. So you can see the second largest, third, fourth largest if you have my book, or you can just go straight to the PC University Guide to Burial Mounds in Ohio and then miss all the really big ones.
Yeah.
So that's the difference.
Yeah, and say it again. What book do you actually lay out this? It's a tour guide, correct? Like you kind of like lay
Yeah.
out kind of like a whole.
Yeah, you get all the history of, what the mound is, if they excavated, what they found.
Wow.
Many mounds, they did find large skeletons, giant skeletons in them, but the mound's still there. You can still see it. Um, so you get the history, you get a photograph of the mound, and then you get directions on how
Yeah.
to see it. And there's 222 sites in Ohio and Indiana, West Virginia, Kentucky, and Michigan, lower Michigan, not the whole
I,
state.
I lived in West Virginia for a little bit. And I'm actually from Maryland, so I'm itching to kind of get back up in that area a little bit right now because I'm honestly I live in Texas right now and just constantly scanning the area and like just noticing like really odd things about the area. But
Not
is
a whole
it?
lot going on, and generally what would probably be Mississippian.
Mm-hmm.
That's around 1300 AD. They did find some large skeletons there that had the archaic features around the Gulf, and
Yeah.
that's where you would find them.
Yeah, I'm curious.
Anything that's not around the Gulf is probably much older.
Yeah.
But you're going to get that through Arkansas, not necessarily Texas. If there was something, it would have to have been right about on the Texarkana, maybe, but Arkansas, Mississippi, um, Georgia, Florida, generally the Gulf, around the Gulf, you're looking at Mississippian type. It goes right up into Ohio
Mm.
and
But
even Indiana, southern Indiana, we have Mississippian. So the when we're talking to giants, we're real isolated. They did have these earthworks in New York.
Hmm.
They did have them in Pennsylvania with a large number of giants. Ohio, and West Virginia is all giants. If
Wow.
it's an earthwork or a mound, it was a giant. There was no Hopewell. There was no Dakota Sioux in West Virginia. There was no Dakota Sioux or Hopewell in Kentucky either.
Yeah.
And Native Americans, even in historic times, would not live in West Virginia or Kentucky because they said it was haunted. The Kanawha River, you all know Mothman.
Hmm.
Now, Point Pleasant is at the mouth of the Kanawha River, and that goes down to Charleston. And there's mounds and giants and geometric earthworks that all be all down the Kanawha. Well, Shawnee called the Kanawha the river of evil spirits, but they would not live. Now, every once in a while, they'd go in there and hunt, but they would not live. They would not live in West Virginia. They were scared of it. They're scared of Kentucky,
Yeah.
and these were all giants. So that's just goes back to my newest book, Ancient America: The Dark Side, and that is the paranormal aspect of that. So you'll see that. I mean, it's not me saying, this place is haunted or that place. I mean, certainly there's people in there with their own experiences,
Hmm.
but we have that provenance of Native Americans in these regions, where the giants live. They would not live there. They were terrified of it. So
Yeah.
there's definitely a precedent for the being haunted, and something that's certainly going to add to your mound trip. To know what's hot, what's not, what's been found, and where, and different things that people have seen. And I don't know. I think there's going to be more and more people going to some of these ancient sites at night, opposed to during the day. And that's when
Interesting.
it really happens.
Wow. Yeah. Have you looked into like I'm sure you have, obviously, but like the Smithsonian, obviously, as a part of this whole cover up, in like the mid 1800s, they released a book about like the earthworks or mounds of the Mississippi Valley, alluding to like giants and like these type of mounds. And then like the next year, there's like this shift where it's like none of it's real, and they kind of there's like a push to discredit like anything like that. Do you know like the reasoning or what kind of caused that?
Well, one of it is that Cyrus Thomas of the Smithsonian, when he took over, he said all of the ancient sites are Native American, and that's it. Anything that disputes that narrative will be destroyed and it will never be talked about. So that paradigm that the universities have today was started almost 200 years ago.
Wow.
I mean, it's a 200-year-old lie.
Yeah.
Now, one of the reasons for that is that the earthworks were surveyed, and like two hinges in Charleston, West Virginia, um, they were together. One was the gateway was facing east, and it was this winter solstice sunrise, and the other one was face uh, the opposite of that, and it was um, the summer solstice sunset. See, they're all opposite one another.
Hmm.
When they're both going to line up, they're just going to line up on either side of the earthwork. So the gateways were, in the opposite directions to get both of those. Well, those were measured at 666 feet in circumference. Well, 666 is the ancient number for the sun. In Chronicles in the Bible, they bring to Solomon 666 talents of gold. And you say, well, what does that mean? Well, look at the name Solomon. Soul, sun. Is Hindi for sun, and An is the Egyptian word for sun. So Solomon is really sun, sun, sun. So it would be appropriate that they would bring him that sun number. And there's another character in the Bible. I forget what verse or what book it's in, but it was Adonakam was his name, and he was escaping Babylon. He had 666 people with him, and Adon is also another sun deity. So here we have Adon, and we have that name, and we have 666 associated with it. It's a Babylonian number for the sun. Um, so we have 666, and then the square earthworks all throughout, especially Chillicothe. I think there's 6 different earthworks. Each square has a side that's 1080 feet. And 1080 was the Babylonian number for the Earth Mother or the Earth Goddess. So square, again, square is reference to that sacred geometry of being lunar or Earth Mother. Circles, of course, are always sun symbols.
Yeah.
Now, 666 and 1080, or sometimes earthworks would be 210 feet into diameter. 210 times pi gives you 660. You need 212 to times pi to go to 666. They used 210, 660 because it was easier to make even with 1080. If that makes any sense. There's an earthwork in or a hinge in Kentucky that's 555 feet in circumference. Now, the importance of that is that 555.555 to the nth degree times pi is 1720, which is the sum total of 1746 of the sum total of 666 or 660 and 1080 is equal to 555.555 times pi. All right. I know that's kind of hard to wrap your head around. So 555 numerically was the sacred marriage of the sun and the Earth Mother is what 555 represented of using 1080 and 666. Well, I said earlier, math doesn't lie.
Yeah.
No, now you have this math. And now you have sacred geometry, circles and squares. And circles are what they should be, and the squares are what they should be, and the circles are what they should be mathematically in line with sacred geometry. And now we have 555s and, 666 and 1080s, all numbers that were used in Babylon.
Mm-hmm.
Now they're showing up in Ohio, as they should be showing up. Shut it down. So I go into that. All my books. I go into it in the Encyclopedia of Ancient Giants, North America. I go into it in the Nephilim Chronicles, Fallen Angels in the Ohio Valley. In Mysteries to some extent, but the Giants book, Nephilim Chronicles. Then there's Nephilim Chronicles, a travel guide to the ancient ruins in the Ohio Valley. That's all your mounds. The one about numerology, Nephilim Chronicles, Fallen Angels in the Ohio Valley. If you're interested in the connections, the Fallen Angels and Nephilim architecture in the Ohio Valley and the numerology especially, which is called gematria. And then the Encyclopedia of Ancient Giants. I have 900 accounts of giants in that book.
Holy cow!
Yeah, it's originally I had to shrink it a little bit, but
so are you finding them through like newspaper articles or kind of just
yeah, newspaper articles, but not exclusively that because a lot of them came from county histories.
Oh wow!
Back in the late 1800s. Most counties had a county history done for them. And where I live.
It's funny right here. I've got
what do you have?
Just the history of Collin County, Texas, where I live. Well, I probably shouldn't have said that.
What's the date on that?
Check. And honestly, I bought this. I found it in a used bookstore because I just found a lot. There's a lot of crazy stuff in around here that's been excavated. That's just kind of hidden, and I was curious to see if it would have this in it. It
Well, a
has
lot
like
of
a
these
his. It
books
has like
were,
a history of a family lineage in it from like
yeah, it's probably old then.
1898. Um, it looks like a reprint. Oh, okay. It's like a reprint from 1958.
All right, that's probably late. If it has genealogy in it, that would make sense. A lot of people were doing that. Generally, they were talking about history, and they would also mention burial mounds in the Midwest.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, 1870s, 80s, 90s,
Mm-hmm.
up to the turn of the century. Now, where I live, Fort Wayne, Indiana, we have the largest genealogical library in the country. So what that means is, Ohio, there's 100 some counties, about 100. Indiana, about 100 counties. West Virginia, Kentucky, a little bit less. Um, Michigan, about the same. But I can go into every one of those counties and get the county history. And then a lot of those, there would be a section of antiquities. And that would be listing where burial mounds were and what properties they were on. So it might
Wow.
say there was a large burial mound, 12-foot high, 60-foot diameter on the George Johnson farm in Liberty Township. In this section, in section 13, Liberty Township on the Johnson farm. Well, I could get a plat map, go to Liberty Township, find out where Johnson lived, match those roads up with a modern map, and find out where that burial mound was. That's how I did it. That's how I went to
Holy
all the
cow.
mounds.
Yeah.
So, there's no road map to it. You get a clue to what farm it was on, in what township. Then in an old plat map, find out where that guy lived, where his property was, and know that somewhere on that property at one time was this burial mound. So there's a lot of knocking on doors, et cetera, to go to these sites, and
Yeah.
dogs. What dogs? Um,
Yeah.
yeah, no fun. Um, but also, they might say, they dug into the mound, and they discovered a skeleton that was 8'2" in length. It was measured by a local doctor. So, they would have that. So now a modern archaeologist would say, well, bones separate, you know, as a person dies, they'll separate in a grave. I was like, look, Poindexter, it was measured by a doctor. All right. Wouldn't he know that if the knee bone and the femur bone were 3 inches apart, and he measured it, that it wouldn't be an accurate measurement of the length of the skeleton. So they think that a doctor from the 1880s wasn't near as smart as some goofball at a university that took 5 classes in archaeology, and then for all other purposes is a complete idiot. This was a doctor 100 years ago. All right, I
Yeah.
think he knew skeletons. When he measured it, I think we can say, all right, this guy probably know what he's doing. But they'll say, well, no, he didn't know what he's doing, because these skeletons will separate in the grave. Well, yeah, but a lot of these mounds had a cap of clay that was burnt rock hard. They'd be busting into these mounds, and
Mhm.
once they got into the clay vault, it would be like concrete. They talk about it.
Wow.
They got these pickaxes. Now they hit this concrete, this dome that was over these skeletons. So no, they were, and a lot of times pretty
Nice.
well preserved,
Yeah.
not with the skin on them or anything, but I mean the bones were
Yeah.
intact.
Hmm.
And they were, and most mounds did have a clay layer, a dome, clay layer, and then they would grow incrementally over size. They were charnel houses, so they would come, they would bury dead, and then they would burn the charnel house, and then, but a lot of times this is after the initial big burials, so the big skeletons, they would grow over time, to the huge sites to um, Grave Creek over 70 foot in height, massive, massive mound, and so steep that if you walk off the side of the mound, you're not going to make it. You're going down. You're not going to like walk down the side of this thing. You've got to, I mean, there's a walkway that goes up to it. It's not way it normally, or, initially was.
Mhm.
But, I mean, you could probably climb it, but you're not going down it. Even on your butt would be scary because once you start to tumble, you're not stopping.
Yeah.
You're not stopping for 70 foot. You're probably going to, you're going to break some things. So it gives you an idea of how these were built. They were built the last 1,000 years.
Yeah.
This isn't dirt thrown into a pile. It was compacted. It was compacted till it was so hard that it would not erode, and it hasn't eroded. There's, you know,
So are there different like within some of these mounds, are there different kind of accounts like are some of them like only like burial sites kind of like with that concrete dome like you said with the clay over top? Is there any other kind of works underneath these type of mounds that you found?
well, they'll find post molds where the charnel house was. So they'll find a circle of round holes that still have sometimes the timber in them. So imagine a round house, and then you have these skeletons in there.
Mm.
So they think they were probably left out, and birds would pick them clean because we do find a lot of birds in like pipes and stuff like that. In the middle of the Newark hens, there's a bird, and it's the bird is eating away the flesh and taking the soul somewhere. Um, but there's but they take these skeletons, they put them in this house. Then I'll have maybe the main burials where the giants, so the two giants, the king and queen, if you will,
Mm.
put a dome over them, um, burn cremate the skulls, what's remained of them. They're bundle buried, so they're put in a stack, and then this whole charnel house is burnt. All the skeletons they're burnt. So you have like a layer of ashes and cremated remains. So then earth goes over that, and then another charnel house is built. And then over time, it just gets bigger and bigger. So sometimes you'll have the big skeletons on the bottom, and then it's earth, ashes, earth, ashes, earth, ashes. So you go to some of these mounds, like Grave Creek, and literally like 1,000 people might be buried there, cremated and then earth put over them. So it's a lot. I mean, a lot. And then some, it may just be one person and dirt. So some 1,000, some one, some a couple. Um, there's one in Charleston, West Virginia. It was two giants, legs extended in a sitting position, arms extended in extended position. So hands out like this, both hands out like this, both legs straight out. And in the middle was a tablet with characters on it. We don't know what. I
Wow.
mean, what happened to that? We don't know. It got lost in the Smithsonian. Um,
Yeah, it seems a lot has. I've heard a few accounts of tablets like that being found with these giants. Have you seen any other accounts of that or?
yeah, at Great Creek, there was one that had Hebrew on it. We don't know about the one in Carolina or in Charleston because that was taken, might have. Other ones, I'll say curious symbols. We don't know what those were. Here in Indiana, there's a hill, and it has Hebrew carved in. And, you know, I mean, who would hoax a Hebrew referring to Isaiah? There's a reference to Isaiah Um, uh, there's there's Old Hebrew and Newer Hebrew. Ancient Hebrew shows up on a tablet in Newark, a large mound with a circle around it. Um, so yeah, it does show up in the Creek Stone from Tennessee. Another case where Hebrew, and one of the importance of Hebrew is that the giants, the Amorites, were a Semitic people. They would have had Hebrew letters. It goes with the story. You know, it's not Chinese, it's not that. It's the language that it should be. It's Hebrew. We are going to find some Hebrew in there. So yeah, and it's the same always. It's always Hebrew. So you think that if they're going to hoax something, I don't know, maybe something different. Why wouldn't they have Greek? Why wouldn't they have Roman? Because it's easier to fudge than Hebrew, especially if it's old script Hebrew. Because when they were supposedly doing these hoaxes, that wasn't real well known. Ancient Hebrew script, modern Hebrew script was. Ancient Hebrew script was not. So, if they're going to do a hoax, generally hoaxers go easy, not hard. And then there's a consistency. So it's like, all right, we're going to hoax. Everybody get their story straight. It's all going to be Old Hebrew. It's going to be spaced apart in 100 years. But everybody if you're going to fake it, make it Hebrew. So that's not.
Yeah.
So it's just another, like I always say, all roads always lead to Babel. Now in Babylon, they weren't speaking Semitic script, but the Amorites in the Levant, they were Semitic speaking. And um, they have some other dealings with the Hebrews as well throughout history. So those two are somewhat tied together. And all the megalithic remains, stone circles, um, megalithic structures are all found around the Jordan River. So they're all kind of coming
Yeah.
right there through, what we would know today as Jerusalem, and
Hmm.
then going north into Syria
Yeah.
on the west bank of the Jordan River is where you're going to find all of the megaliths, and those megaliths are going to be duplicated in England, Ireland, northern Spain, northern Africa. Uh, all those are going to be duplicated in those regions, but they have their beginnings in those biblical lands. One historian who referenced, uh, something looked like Stonehenge over in biblical lands. And then we have another Stonehenge over in Tripoli, and we know that the Amorites were there. So anyway, there is a diaspora out of the biblical lands across North Africa. But in the greatest concentrations in England,
Yeah.
some in Ireland, some in Scotland, yes, but England. So Stonehenge, all the hinges, earthworks, circular earthworks, interior decks, exterior wall, gateway aligned to a solar event. That's what you're going to find in England.
Yeah. Have you found any accounts of like excavations that have uncovered like like stone walls like completely underground? Anything like that?
No, I know what you're referring to. That was a big deal. I don't know what, 10 years ago, the stone wall in Texas. I don't think anything ever came of it. I think
Oh
it was,
yeah,
I
the
think it
rock
was,
wall in Texas. Yeah. I'm just
I think
asking because I've just heard like a few of a couple other instances, so I was just kind of curious
not
about
really.
that.
Not, I know that one down there did it end up being a hoax? It's,
They kind of I feel like there's just been a cover up of it, to be honest, because there's a ton of the pictures show a stone like I mean they say a 70-foot stone wall completely underground. They completely stopped uncovering it. But
yeah.
but
Well,
I'm kind of curious
here's the
about that. I'm curious
here's
about
the
that.
thing. This You know, I have people, claim to have found things, and
Hmm.
I'm probably gonna run, I'll run you through the grill you pretty hard if you say you've claimed something.
Yeah.
And, you know, somebody, saying that it was Viking ruins in Arkansas that he had discovered. And he had a YouTube thing, and there's a lot of people just, they're just out there trying to find something,
Yeah.
It's like you're not going to find anything, but they'll lie about what they've found.
Hmm.
And I said, well, I'm not going to say you didn't. I go, why would Vikings be in Arkansas? I mean,
Yeah.
you have something there like rubies or emeralds or something. Well, I mean, something that would draw somebody that's come all the way from Europe to
Yeah.
hear that maybe they'd heard about it on the East Coast. They're like, there's a place. I have this emerald. Where'd you get that? Well, that's down a river, down this river to another river and a 10-mile walk, and you'll get into the land of rubies or jade or emerald,
Yeah.
whatever it is. All right. Wow. All right. And then they find an emerald over in Scandinavia. It probably came from Arkansas. All right. Now you got some. Well, why would a Viking be in Arkansas? Is there anything special about the cave? No. Is there anything special about that area? No. Is there any other historic finds around here? Prehistoric finds? No, no, nothing. So you say there's ruins on an entrance into this cave? Yeah. Send me a picture. Oh my gosh. Little bit of rain seeping down through some limestone will make some little squiggly lines. But it isn't writing, it's just some squiggly lines on a rock.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't make any kind of
Things
pattern.
like, yeah.
But so desperate are they to discover something. You can look at it and go, yeah, those are runes.
Yeah.
I mean, in the same conversation, he goes, well, because I'm really not buying it. What else you got? All right, I got this axe. Yeah, all right, what is it? It's like it's 4,000 years old. Wow. Let's see a picture of it. So he sent me a picture. That's the Mississippian axe. It dates to the Mississippian era, which you should find in Arkansas.
Yeah.
Yeah, Arkansas.
Normal. Yeah. Normal.
I forget what Mississippian mounds are in Arkansas, but there's a really nice site down there,
Yeah.
preserved. To what extent, preserved Mississippian site. Oh yeah, that's a Mississippian axe. I mean, it's a nice one. It's
Hmm.
not 4,000 years old.
Yeah.
It's
I wonder,
medium
so where did they get the date from? That's kind of where I'm always curious is where the date
because
comes from.
they just so want to find something,
Yeah.
and they're completely uneducated. To come to me and it's like immediately it's like, dude, it's a Mississippian axe. It's nice, not 4,000 years old.
Yeah.
Not that. Didn't come here by Vikings or anything. It's a Mississippian axe. It's a nice one. But I didn't even get it right. I mean, don't tell
Yeah.
me we have a 4,000-year-old axe. We have a
Yeah.
Mississippian
Once
axe.
you start throwing the numbers out and stuff and start like, that's
It's
where
like, what?
like, yeah, where the actual like claims come from. I was asking about the stone wall, I guess, that they may or may not have found in Rockwall, Texas. But around here, something that I have noticed, which is super interesting, is a bunch of excavation sites that are actually from the Smithsonian are involved, and the University of Texas are also involved, and it's this is a completely different site, just 30 minutes away at Lake Louisville. But they deemed like 50 different sites around that lake prehistoric, and they found multiple hearths with bones of people that they originally in 1950 during the actual discovery of it. They dated 37,000 years back. This was the Smithsonian and the University of Texas dating that. But then about 20 years later, um, they since flooded it out. It's now a dam, a reservoir, lake, whatever. It's all flooded out. You can't look look at it. But like 20, 30 years ago, they uncovered it, looked at it again, and then redated it to 10, like those people to 10,000 years ago. But it's not. It's a part of this area that isn't talked about at all, and people don't know about it. Even people
Right.
that
And
live right off that lake.
why
Um,
did they why did they date it to 10,000? Because it was 10,000 BC. That was the termination of the last ice age.
mm,
And what happens? What do we all learn in school, kids? The termination of the last ice age around 10,000 BC, a corridor called the Beringia corridor opened up that allowed people from Asia to walk over into North America. And all of these people would be the heirs to modern Native Americans. How could it be 37,000 BC? That would go against what universities' religion is.
yeah,
So it had to be redone, lied about, so history could be rewritten, even though it was a pain.
yeah,
History needed to be rewritten because we can't live with evidence that would say what we profess of the Beringia theory is wrong. That's all that is. That's
yeah.
just cover up. That was a cover up. Um,
Well,
they never got
there's
those dates. They
yeah,
knew what dates that this was going to date to before they ever dug, and they may not even have dug into it. It may have been a faux. It may have been just to get some grant money to line their pockets. They never actually pulled up any carbon to date because there's no reason for them to do it because they know they're going to come up with 37,000 BC.
yeah,
Um, this is probably going to be pre-modern human, likely Neanderthal. This
yeah.
would totally,
They call them Clovis people. They describe them as the Clovis. I'm sure you probably have heard of that.
yeah. Well, Clovis is going to fall within their paradigm 10,000
Yeah,
BC.
that's when since they
But
changed, they
there are
shifted the
cruder,
timeline. Yeah.
there are cruder.
Which, by the way, I don't believe their narrative of Clovis. Once they date it at something and then they go back and change it after, it becomes
Yeah,
very
because
sketchy. Like,
Clovis matches up with a people in Europe called the Solutreans.
okay,
So they think around 12 to 10,000 BC that people were coming over here from Europe because the napping techniques of Clovis and those of the Solutreans are identical. And you
gotcha.
can't find a prototype in Asia that
Yeah.
looks like Clovis.
Hmm.
Of the people, continue to come down, bringing in new technology, but there is precedent of Solutreans,
Yeah.
which is coming right out of France and Germany and mid Europe through there, Western Europe. So that's another problem. Now there was the head of the Smithsonian. Oh, I can't. Owsley was his name, and he was the champion of Solutrean. And I'll tell you a story before we have to go. I had contacted this Owsley, who's like the expert, this Solutrean, and this that. And I was talking with his secretary, and I said, "Hey, would you give him a picture of a skull I have, and see if he can give me an idea, a racial ID on it?" She said, "All right." So I sent her an email. I emailed her a picture of the skull. And I said, "Well, what did he come up with?" He look at it? Yeah, he looked at it. He gives, he got a result. Yeah, I got a result. All right. What is it? He said, "Well, it's a Caucasian skull." Okay. She said, "Where's it from?" I go, "No, I'm not going to say." No, where did it come? I go, "What? From the Ohio?" It's from the history of Coshocton County, Ohio. And it's a skull they pulled out of a mound in Circleville, out of a large burial mound in Circleville. He's like, "Oh." So I get a letter back from her about a week later. She goes, well, I gave that picture of the skull back to the anthropologist. And now he's not sure if it's Caucasian or not. And it's like, well, of course. What you telling me it's from Ohio, it's not going to be Caucasian anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go with this first evaluation. See, as soon as as soon as they found out that they were wrong,
Yeah.
now all of a sudden it all changes.
Yeah.
Oh, it's from Ohio. Well, it can't be Caucasian. It can't be a European type skull
Yeah.
because it's from a burial mound in Ohio. That can't be. So let me change my analysis. Now I'm telling you, I don't think it's European. Okay. So see, that's how it works.
Yeah.
So if you can get lucky enough to fool them and have them authenticate data that they don't know the origin of it, you'll probably get the truth. So I did get a little bit of insight in that, and that was his analysis of the skull
Oh.
from it wasn't a giant, but it was just a skull, but it was a conical earthwork that would not have been Dakota Sioux. This would have been Adena / Amorite / biblical giant / Nephilim. So anyway, I'll leave you with that.
Listen close, it's the occult folk. It's the occult folks. It's the occult